One of these three men was scanning boarding passes at a regional airport less than a year ago, and right now he is faster than the kid the entire world keeps comparing to Usain Bolt. Stick with me for the next few minutes, because by the end of this video, you're going to question everything you thought you knew about who the fastest man alive actually is. And there's a twist near the end involving real numbers that nobody in the sport saw coming. Before we go any further, smash that subscribe button right now, because we are breaking down one of the wildest storylines in track and field history, and you do not want to miss what happens when these three names collide again. All right, let's get into it. There are three men right now who all have a legitimate claim to being the fastest sprinter alive, and each one of them got there in a completely different way. Let's start with a man who just made it official on paper. June 16th, Czech Republic, the Golden Spike meet. Noah Lyles lines up for the 150 meters, a distance you almost never see contested. Against Gout Gout, the 18-year-old Australian the internet has been hyping for 2 years straight. This was their very first head-to-head matchup ever. Lyles crosses the line in 14.67 seconds, a world best. Nobody in recorded history has ever run that distance faster. South Africa's Sinisifo Dambile takes second in 14.78. And Gout Gout, the kid nobody can stop talking about, finishes third in 14.96. Lyles just created a new entry in the record books that did not even exist before that race happened. The track world is still buzzing about it. But here's the problem. Everyone is talking about Lyles. Everyone is talking about Gout Gout. And almost nobody is talking about the third man who might actually belong in this exact conversation. His name is Sam Blaskowski, and his story is the part of this video nobody saw coming. Rewind to May 30th, the Music City Track Carnival in Cleveland, Tennessee. Blaskowski lines up in the 100 meters and runs a win-legal 9.89. That single race made him the fastest white sprinter in recorded history, breaking a mark that had stood since 2011. Now here is the part that makes this story hit completely different. Blaskowski did not come up through some Division I powerhouse with a full scholarship and a 5-star recruiting profile attached to his name. He competed at the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse, a Division III program, the level where athletic scholarships do not even exist. He won 11 individual national titles there, and barely anyone outside the sport noticed. After college, while he was still trying to figure out if he even had a future in this sport, he worked at a small regional airport just to save up enough money to move to Florida and chase this seriously for the first time in his life. That is the man who just ran 9.89. Not a blue-chip prospect. A guy who was clocking in for shifts at an airport 1 year ago. Once he made that move to Florida, he started training under Dennis Mitchell at Star Athletics, the same group that has Sha'Carri Richardson and Kenny Bednarik on its roster. You do not get a seat in that room by accident. People inside the sport started watching him differently after that, and for a brief moment, it genuinely felt like Blaskowski was a guy who could walk into a room with Lyles and Gout Gout and not look out of place. Picture it for a second. Lyles on one side of the track, Gout Gout on the other, and right in the middle, a man who was working an airport job 12 months earlier. That image alone is exactly why this stopped being three separate stories and became one single race, with Blaskowski by himself a lane in it. But before you start building the highlight reel in your head, we need to talk about what happened on June 14th at the LA Grand Prix, the very same week as that breakout performance. Blaskowski lines up in the 100 meters against a stacked field. Kenny Bednarik wins it in 9.72. Christian Coleman takes second in 9.84. Blaskowski finishes fourth in 9.91, 200th of a second slower than the time that made him a viral name just 2 weeks earlier. Now line that up against Noah Lyles on June 4th at the Diamond League meet in Rome. Lyles wins the 100 meters in 9.88, his season best. Do the math with me here. Lyles at 9.88, Blaskowski at 9.91 in his very next real test against elite competition. On a pure technical level right now, today, Lyles is still faster. That is not an opinion. That is simply what the clock says. So here's the question that decides who actually wins this hypothetical showdown. Was 9.89 the real Sam Blaskowski, the version who lines up with Lyles and Gout Gout and genuinely belongs there? Or was 9.91 the real version, the one who gets left behind the moment the field actually gets serious? Keep that question in your head. Because the answer is not as simple as it looks, and I promise we are getting to it. A few days after that breakout race in Tennessee, Blaskowski sat down for an interview and said something that should make you sit up straight. He admitted that he had just run a 9.8, which he called really fast, but then said he genuinely does not believe they have peaked yet. Think about what that actually means coming from a man who just ran the second fastest time in the entire world this season. He is not treating 9.89 like a ceiling. He is treating it like a starting point. And when you actually look closely at the numbers, that fourth-place finish in L.A. is not the disaster it sounds like on paper. This is a man who, 1 year ago, was running times more than a tenth of a second slower than where he sits today, going from a personal best of 10.05 all the way down to 9.89, and then immediately backing it up with a 9.91 against an Olympic-level field 2 weeks later. That is not someone falling apart under pressure. That is someone proving the first race was not a fluke. If you are still with me at this point, drop a comment right now with your honest prediction, because the next part of the story is exactly where things start to get a lot bigger. Let's be completely honest about the real obstacle standing in Blaskowski's way. He is 23 years old and has only been competing at this level for less than a year. Lyles has an Olympic gold medal, 4 world titles in the 200 meters, and now a brand new world best in the 150. Gout Gout has been groomed and watched closely by the entire sport since he was just 16 years old. Blaskowski has one big race and one statement performance against a stacked field. Talent can show up fast in this sport, but consistency is what takes years to build. Right now, genuinely nobody knows whether Blaskowski is a sprinter who finally found his level or a man who caught lightning in a bottle exactly once in Tennessee. That question is not going away anytime soon. But while everyone's been busy arguing about Blaskowski's ceiling, there's a third lane on this track that we have not even examined yet. The kid the entire world keeps comparing to Bolt. So let's bring Gout Gout into this comparison properly, because this is the matchup everyone has been waiting for. On April 18th at the Australian Athletics Junior Championships in Brisbane, Gout Gout won the 100 meters in 10.21 seconds, his second consecutive Australian under 20 title in that event. Genuinely impressive for an 18-year-old. No argument there. But now, put that next to Blaskowski's 9.89. 10.21 versus 9.89. That is a 32 hundredths of a second gap in the 100 meters. In elite sprinting, that is not close. That is a massive separation between two athletes. Say it again so it actually lands. Gout Gout at 10.21, Blaskowski at 9.89. The kid everyone has been calling the next Bolt is currently a full third of a second behind a man who was working an airport job just 1 year ago. That is a stat the entire internet has somehow been sleeping on. Put those two on a start line together today, and Blaskowski crosses the finish line well before Gout Gout is even close. That is not hype talk. That is exactly what the clock says. 2 lanes down, 1 left. And it happens to be the one that has been sitting at the front of this entire conversation the whole time. Now, before anybody gets carried away, remember what we already covered. Lyles ran 9.88 in Rome this season. That is still faster than Blaskowski's personal best. Lyles is the reigning Olympic champion, and right now he remains the most proven sprinter of these three by a wide margin. Nothing about one good race in Tennessee changes that fact. But here is the detail that might genuinely change everything going forward. Lyles is 28 years old and sitting at the absolute peak of a career he has spent over a decade building. Gout Gout is 18 and still physically growing into his frame. And Blaskowski has been training at this elite level for less than 12 months total. He has barely scratched the surface of what altitude camps, world-class coaching, and a full season inside Dennis Mitchell's training group can actually do to a sprinter's times over time. If a man can drop 16 hundredths of a second in a single race after just 1 year with the right team around him, what does year 2 of that process actually look like? If these 3 men lined up in the exact same 100-meter final next season, who actually wins it, Lyles, Gout Gout, or Blaskowski? Drop your pick down in the comments right now, because I genuinely want to see where this fan base stands on this before we go any further. Here is where this story gets even bigger going forward. Lyles is going to keep chasing more records on the biggest stages this sport has to offer. Gout Gout has an entire season ahead of him to close that 100-meter gap and prove that Brisbane was not actually a ceiling either. And Blaskowski, the man now training in the same room as Sha'Carri and Kenny Bednarik every single day, is about to get tested against fields exactly like that one over and over again. People inside the sport are watching him differently now. Coaches are watching him differently now. And that shift in perception is a part of this whole situation that makes it crazier than anybody could have predicted just a year ago. 3 men, 3 completely different paths toward the same title of fastest man alive. One built his path on more than a decade of pure dominance. One has been groomed for this exact moment since he was 16 years old. And one was scanning boarding passes at a regional airport, quietly saving up just enough money to give the sport one real shot, and is now lining up in the very same races as Olympic champions and world record holders. He never got a scholarship offer that changed his life overnight. Nobody discovered him at 16. He bought himself a one-way ticket to Florida and simply bet on himself. That part of the story hits harder than any stopwatch ever could. So here is what I genuinely want to know from you watching right now. A year from today, do you think Sam Blaskowski is still part of this conversation, still chasing these 2 men on the world stage? Or do you think Lyles and Gout Gout eventually pull away from him for good? Drop your honest prediction down below right now, because something tells me we're all going to be coming back to read this comment section again a lot sooner than anybody expects. And if you want to be here the moment these 3 actually share a start line for real, make sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on. Because when that race happens, this channel is going to be the very first one to break down exactly what it means.